Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl. When I was a kid, there were only three cars that really mattered. The Ferrari Testarossa, the Lamborghini Countach, and the Porsche 911. Why? Well, the Ferrari Testarossa, because that was the car you got to drive in Outrun at the arcades. The Lamborghini Countach, because clearly every person in my age group had to find at least a bit of wall space for a picture of that particular car. And the Porsche 911, because my friend's dad had one, and every time he fired it up, goosebumps went up and down my arm. Well, in the years that followed, things changed a little bit. The Lamborghini Countach disappeared as the 80s did, and if you've ever had the privilege of driving one or owning one, you'll probably agree that that was the best place for it to stay. The Ferrari Testarossa, well, that had to give way to the Subaru Impreza with the launch of Gran Turismo on the PlayStation, but the Porsche 911 stayed with me through the whole thing. In 1999, they held a competition to decide the 100 best cars of the century, and in position number 5, the Porsche 911. Now, you could say it was beaten by 4 other cars, but this was the only car that had stayed in constant production ever since its birth. And that makes it more than a little bit special to me and pretty much every single person I know who loves cars. So, when you're going to completely redesign a classic, you want to be extremely careful what you do with it. We're here with the brand new Porsche 911. Can it live up to all of that history and hype? Let's take a closer look and find out. Oh man, I'm definitely not letting my wife watch this video.
Can we go quicker or?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, you'll have already figured out I have more than a little bit of a soft spot for Porsches, the 911 in particular. When you redesign something like this, it is particularly risky because if you don't reference the old popular designs, you're going to upset a large part of your fan base. But if you keep it looking too traditional and classic, well, then you're not innovating and moving with the times and speaking to the new generations. What really hits me from the front of this car at first glance is what a fabulous job they've done at referencing so much of that traditional design whilst making it look very modern and stylish. So how do they do that? Well, the first thing that you notice when you look here is the additional width that we now have on this car. That broader stance that it has on the road is really going to help, especially when we come around to the rear where all the power is sitting. But from the front head on, I think the most significant and important feature of this design language is that we still have these beautiful round lights at the front right throughout the 911's history. Those have been key, and every time that Porsche have tried messing with that, it's just made people angry. Now, if we have a look on this model, we can see that we have the full matrix LEDs. They're optional, you don't have to go with them. But for what it's worth, I think they're a nice addition in terms of the design cue. The lights themselves do actually look a little bit different, even when they're not switched on. Now, as far as the rest of the design goes, well, to me, visually, it's been simplified significantly. The lines are really clean, but they're really nicely integrated. The detail and the way they cut into the overall shape of the car just really finishes it off well. Now, I'm very keen to know what you think about it. And okay, guys, I know that sometimes you think that we should not be quite so enthusiastic about cars, but I have to tell you, from first glance at this new 911, I'm more than a bit excited. So later on, we're going to get the chance to take it out on the track. And obviously, I have some very high expectations about whether the drive of the new engine can deliver quite as well as the aesthetic does. But for now, I want to show you what's my favorite part of the exterior design, and that's the side. Let's take a look. I'm standing right out of the way of the flank here, so you can really get the full visual scope of the side here. Now, when this car comes out, it's going to be available in 2 flavors, and that's all-wheel drive or obviously the classic rear-wheel drive. That's significant because if you have a look here, we have larger wheels at the rear than at the front. Now later on we're going to have the chance to talk to the engineers and ask them, I really want to know, is that necessary from an engineering perspective, really? Or is that to enhance the visual aesthetic of the car? Because for me, it works absolute wonders. Now, obviously, sports cars are always going to divide opinion massively, and you're either going to be a fan of the 911 or you're not. But I put this to you, even if you're not, even if this is not your car of choice, just look at that sweeping roofline. Now, I have to be honest, I'm not a fan of the way in recent years saloon cars have embraced the coupe styling, because aesthetically it looks nice, but then practically it really spoils the usability of the rear of the car. Well, this is why so many of those cars use this styling. When you use it on a sports car, it just looks so elegant. That sweep right into these meaty rear arches really make this car look as if it's moving while it's standing still. I'm not in love with this particular colour, but I think it does offer us the chance to see quite how great this car looks, even on a grey day, even with a duller colour. Now, there have been some interesting touches here, not least for ergonomic and styling reasons. We now have fully flush handles, and if you saw the preview with Thomas, you'll know that these have a little bit of a lift to them, which does make them feel, I have to say, a touch odd to use. But when they do sit flush, they really do add to the overall feeling of the side of this car. You know, we look at a lot of cars in Autogefühl, and sometimes the newer designs, I think, work a little bit better than others. But in this car, I honestly couldn't see how this side view could have been improved. Coming around to the rear of the car now, and for me, the first piece of design compromise. Here we have the rear spoiler. We're not going to be able to show you this right now, but we will a little later on. As it pops up throughout use, it actually extends out quite far. Now, you'll remember the original whale tail on the back of the 911, and there's a little bit of a visual reference here, but clearly this is a huge challenge in design terms. You want the back of the car to look great. Of course you do. It's the bit that most people are going to get to see as you go past. But at the same time, it's really important from an aerodynamic standpoint. So how do you design that compromise? Well, I think that they've erred on the side of caution and gone with making the rear of this car look as svelte as possible when it is in its down position. So the back looks absolutely great, doesn't it? Those rear haunches are not standing out too much. They wrap really nicely into the side and the back. We have a LED strip that goes right the width here, which helps flatten it out and make it look that bit more powerful. Now, second compromise point, and I'm pretty certain we're going to divide a bit more opinion here. If we come down to the bottom here, we have these two oval ports for the exhaust. Are they integral to the exhaust design? Does it really matter? Well, it does bother quite a lot of people. So I have to tell you, it doesn't offend me that much. I think visually I prefer to have an overall uniform design. And for me, provided there is exhaust gas passing through the exhaust port, that is not what I call a fake exhaust. So I'm happy with it, but that might not be for everyone's taste. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Now, we're going to take a look slightly higher up. Jonas is going to come in so I can show you the engine lift flap, and we can have a look and see how that's been integrated into the rear design. From the rear, this is the engine access and of course that all important cooling. Now, I'm just going to pop round to the side so we can pop that open and you can take a look and see what's lurking underneath that lovely new, more powerful beast. Doesn't that look great? Now, these are of course cooling fans, but they do look remarkably a lot as if we have extra subwoofers fitted right into the rear of the car. It gets very, very hot back here, as you can imagine. So this is really only for checking and adding your fluids when you need to get access to the engine. Now, we do have a fully cutaway version inside, so we're going to be taking a much closer look in a lot more detail at how the rear mountain engine actually fits into this car chassis. But for now, when you've got one sitting in your driveway and your friends want to have a little sneak peek, I think it's quite nice to be able to open that up and show them, don't you? We've got a handy lineup here of 3 different cars so we can give you an idea of some of the different colour and wheel options. Obviously, you can go with whatever's going to work best for you. These are the Spider ones that Thomas showed you in the static preview, and here we can see that we have a chrome trim around the edge of the windows. If we move slightly further forwards, you can see this extremely bold yellow. And here we have a completely different look wheel. Now, if you also remember from Thomas's static preview, there was one more wheel type, and that was the classic look. On this last car over here, we can see the dark grey look with this classic wheel design, very much reminding us of past 911s. And this car is also coming with that chrome window trim. Now, I have to tell you, I've changed my opinion since we've been here. When I first saw our test car, I thought, oh, it's a grey day, a grey car, I'm not convinced. But if I can make Jonas walk with me over to the apron, I will admit I've kind of developed a bit of a crush. I not only have grown to really like this grey, but I really like these wheels. Very simple, to me very elegant, and they really emphasize the way that the styling is discreet, I think understated, well, for a sports car anyway. For me, they work great. Whatever you go with, you're going to get those larger rear wheels than the front, and there's plenty to choose from. So whatever your taste is, I'm certain you're going to be able to find something that suits you perfectly. Well, now it's time to take a look inside and see what's happening. You can see that the key is a very standard Porsche affair. Really a fan of this key. Obviously, I like the way that it echoes the car's design, and it feels very nice in your hand. Now, we come to my really main criticism of the car design so far. I love everything about the way this car looks, but you know I'm a big fan of features that you have to touch every single day, just being effortless. This, in order to be aerodynamic, has an electronic feature to it. So it lifts up in part and shuts, if we wait for a little while, all by itself. Now that's a nice design feature, so what's wrong with it, you might be thinking? It just doesn't feel natural and instinctive. There we are, and that's it, just going back in there. When you pull it to start with, it doesn't give you that solid satisfaction that you want, and then when you shut it, again, it just doesn't feel quite the way you would like it to, I think, from previous designs. So, okay, could be a taste thing. I guess it is something to get used to, but not quite for me. I love the way it looks when it's closed so much, though, I might just about learn to cope with that. So, interior design, well, obviously here we have a huge range of different choices. At the moment, it isn't possible to get anything that has no leather in it, so if you're not a leather fan, you may have to wait a little longer for that. But you can have some say over quite how much of which materials are used. There are a very wide range of different options. The main thing you're going to notice that's really standing out for you when you get into this car versus the predecessor is, of course, the new digital display. Well, it's really rather nice and cozy in here. I'm pleased to tell you that having now driven a few laps in the car, it really works in a very intuitive manner, and it's not disturbing. I think, like a lot of other people, whenever I hear the idea that analog's going out and digital's coming in, I am really concerned for how that's practically, just see if I can turn that off, there we go, how that's practically going to really strike me when I'm using the car. And what I really like is that we've stuck to a good, solid, traditional analog dial right in the middle here. So although there's a lot of digital information, we haven't forgotten the point of the car, and that is the driver's experience. So the rev counter clearly is the central feature of our visual display, and everything else is kind of a little peripheral. It looks nice and stylish, and it's been nicely executed. All the other materials, as you really would expect, are very high quality and very nicely finished. So your experience of sitting this car is every bit what you would expect from a 911. If I have my choice in any sports car, I'm always going to want to go analog over digital. But that said, I think this has been integrated in a very sensitive way, so it doesn't feel too much and too in your face. Now, there are a huge amount of different styling choices to go with here. You can see that on the surface this looks a little bit like a dark plastic, which obviously is what it is. I think I prefer the wood trim. That's my personal taste. I like the dark interior. I like those wooden touches because they really add an extra element for me that I think is nice. Now, being a Porsche, the only way you can acquire for yourself one of these clocks right in the center is if you go with the Sports Chrono package. That also gives you this nice drive mode selection button here. And they work really, really intuitively and well when you're driving the car. So come on, you know, if you can afford the car in the first place, why not go a little bit higher? In terms of the controls themselves, this divided opinion a little bit amongst us. Thomas wasn't completely convinced about the knurling here on this gear shifter. I don't know that this is the nicest, most natural feeling gear shifter that I've ever seen, but honestly, I don't think you're going to be using it or interacting with it a whole lot anyway. This is the 8-speed DSG that we now have with this car. Don't worry if you're a manual person, there are plenty of manual options going to be available. That said, the 8-speed DSG is a beautiful piece of engineering. So once you've got the thing in drive, that's really the end of the amount of time you're going to spend thinking about that. And I appreciate the way that not having a larger gear stick here means that we can access these options in a much simpler way. This knurling is echoed on this top row of features as well as the bottom. And that means that without being bamboozled by 100 different options, we only have a very limited array of manual selections here, which means obviously we can keep our focus entirely on the road and we can intuitively feel exactly what it is we want to select without needing to look at it. So again, it's a choice. We have high gloss plastic down here. Not in love with that, but it looks fine. It actually looks very smart. I like these styling details where this looks like a really separate, nicely thought out piece of design. I've got to be honest, I quite like this one cup holder. It lets the passenger know exactly what you think about their position within the car. This car is here for your entertainment, not theirs. They can organize their own drink storage. This is for the driver. And that really is the entire way that the cockpit is laid out. This is, of course, a driver's car. And it feels great. It looks great. It works great. As Thomas showed you when he took a look at the world premiere, one of the most remarkable things about the interior of this car is the amount of headroom we have available. Now this has a sunroof in it, so look at this, still plenty. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, but say it with me, regular viewers, I have a very long torso. So I can tell you that I am more than comfortable in this car, and you will be too. If you're anything beneath 6'2", you don't even need to think about it, but that's with this as well, so plenty of space. We have 2 seats back here and they do have latch points, but are they practically usable? Well, let's find out. I'm not the tallest guy in the world. Oh, well, you know what? I can fit back here. My knees are obviously very compressed either side of the seat, but honestly, if I had to get picked up in one of these things by my friend with somebody else so we could get a lift somewhere, you could cope with this for a reasonable distance. And I'm not the smallest guy in the world either, so I don't think they're only for use by a child. Obviously it's cramped, but for a sports car, there's actually kind of a pleasing amount of space back here. You understand what I mean. But is this space realistically going to take a normal sized person like a Jonas, say? I don't know, what do you think, Jonas? Could you fit back here?
Yes.
Porsche have very kindly lent us Timo, which is a good thing, because he is going to be able to show us exactly what the new 911 can deliver. Now, Timo, before we get going, and incidentally, if you're looking at him thinking he looks a little bit familiar, that's because he's the chap whose dust I was eating when I was being taken around the Nordschleife
Yes.
with Anja Vassetora, and I am very excited to have the opportunity to see him driving this car today. Now, I wrote down some numbers. Before we left, I wanted to run by you. In 1963, the original 911, let's do a little pop quiz. Let's see what you remember. 0 to 100 time. Oh! 1963. Clock's running down, Timo. No.
I don't know, 10 seconds?
9 seconds.
Ah, not so bad, not so bad, not so bad.
Top speed?
210.
Very good. Very good. And horsepower?
200?
It's not, I tell you what, it's not bad. It's 190.
Shit.
Now, right. Right now, the car that we're sitting in, well, I'm sure you know all these numbers anyway. We've got 3.6 seconds, which we can drop down by 0.2 if we go with the chrono pack, which we do have on this car. And we have a top speed of 308.
Yes.
Now, I did some calculations. This car has almost been in production for 60 years.
Yes.
If it stays then in production for another 60 and goes by the same margins, this car will be doing a top speed of 450 kilometers per hour and 0 to 100 time of 1.1 second.
Not so bad, huh?
So Timo, are you up for driving that?
Yeah.
In 60 years
in 60
time?
years. Oh, in 6 years, then I'm 106 years old. Okay, I'm getting older, I'm getting slower, so it's very important that the car is going faster, so I take it.
You heard it first on Autogefühl. We are coming back to Hockenheim
Yes,
to experience that in 60 years. But for now, we are at the Hockenheimring, and
in
we
60 years, maybe you have no hairs and my hairs are grey, huh?
You will still look better than me, my friend. Don't worry. Right, back to business.
Yes.
Tell me about this car. Tell me about what we can experience.
Yeah, so what we have a lot of things that are new and again better on the car. So it means we have 30 horsepower more in this car, so now we have 450 horsepower. We have now 21 inch tires on the car, so we make a big step in wet handling, so we are much better in wet handling. Also we are in braking 1% better. And also in dry, we are again a little bit better. So it means it's a complete new generation of tires. That's the one thing. The other thing is we are more direct with the steering wheel, or with the steering. The steering system is more direct. Also the rear steering, I don't know the right name in English. It's also more direct. So it means the car is going more sportive, more quick, and again more comfortable. So I think everything is going a little bit better.
Now we're in the four-wheel drive version.
No,
right now.
no, two-wheel.
This is two-wheel.
Two-wheel, yes. Two-wheel.
Well, that's the most fun, right? If you're going to have a rear-mounted engine, you're going to want the rear-wheel drive.
Yes.
Now, can you still, I guess, you know, we've got optional wet weather handling as well. Can you still have as much fun in the modern car with all the assistance systems as you could with the 911 back in the day?
Yes, you can. With this car, you can have all the fun with this car, because it's very sportive. It's also safe because we have a lot of rear stability, and with all the systems, you can have again the same fun than with the cars before.
So I'm guessing for your choice, you're a rear-wheel drive man, right?
Yes.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming this is by no means the first time you've ever been on this ring. You've been on this ring a lot, right?
Yes.
And
I know the old track. It's
really?
going there straight. Yes.
Wow. And what did you drive on the old track?
Formula Junior in 1992, I think it was. Yeah.
Wow.
Formula race car, and it was a long straight.
Wow. Do you still drive here now?
Just for driver trainings, or maybe a presentation like this today. But you know, I'm also like you, an old man, and no racing anymore. So I have to earn money for my family.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Like you.
Well, this is kind of a fun way to do it, though, right?
Yeah. They are.
Now,
it's a good way.
I think we have the most important point that I haven't mentioned yet. Thomas, what are you thinking? What are you talking about? Thomas claimed it was not practical to get in the back of this car. Right now, as you may be able to see, Jonas is in the back of this car.
Yes, he's in the back.
Reviewing footage while we are driving round the Hockenheim. So clearly you can realistically sit in the back of this car. That's quite some
But he's looking good on the back, huh? He's looking good.
He looks great. He looks good. Now we'll see if he looks good after a couple more laps.
Yeah. Can we go quicker, or?
Yeah, sure. Tell me, do we have the ceramic brakes on this car or the standards?
No, we have. And this is the standard. On this car, we have the standard.
Okay.
The guy said to me, "You're the oldest one. Take the standard car." You know.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and what you see is that we can go
that's nice.
very quick.
Oh boy, that's great. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So how have they they gone about increasing the braking performance? Because my understanding is the weight of this car is the same as the predecessor.
No,
give
it's
or
a
take.
little bit more. We have around about 50 kilos more than
50
to the
kilos
older
more.
car. But we are getting 1% better. So it means we are now around about 31 meters from 100 to 0.
So how have they delivered that increase in performance? Is that bigger discs?
It's a disc. That's I don't know if it's bigger, but more grip, more
the
sensitive
tires.
on the ABS system.
Right,
so
right.
everything again is getting better and better. But it's a very hard job to find braking distance.
Are you feeling a significant difference in terms of the drive because of this new change with the larger wheels in the back? Does that make a big difference in
Yes,
that, in the
yes.
feel?
You know, that's my daily job is to work as a tire tester inside Porsche. And when we start the development with the 20-21 inch, it's much better than before when we make the development with the 20 inch or 1990 inch in 997. So it was directly a big step. So.
Did that mean that huge adjustments had to be made in terms of the handling of the car?
Yes.
I mean, that really does change the driving dynamics significantly.
Yep. But also here, it's going a little bit higher. You know, everything is going a little bit better and higher. It's
Favorite?
normal in 911 development.
Favorite feature of the new car?
Favorite feature of the new car is to drive around with the car. No, for me the biggest point is you get in the car, you go to drive and you say, okay, it's clearly a 911. It's very clear. So, and I think, okay, we have modern times. You have electronic systems, also like here, like the wet mode. But for me, the most important point is you go in the car and you feel it's a 911.
I think, you know, it's funny you say that because we were saying exactly the same thing earlier
Yeah.
with the aesthetic design. It's so important that you keep that characteristic. Jonas, how are you doing back there?
Great.
Now, I've been asking a lot of silly questions, but I think on this next lap, I think we all want to see what Timo can show us. What do you think?
So we have to go quick?
Yeah. What do you think, Jonas?
Let's go.
Let's do it. Ooh, nice. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Those brakes really
Yeah, it
are
was-
crisp, aren't they?
His headphone was working, was going away.
Oh, that's great. The amount of traction you have on those bends is just superb.
You can go flat on the throttle, and you have enough traction.
There's always argument and debate over what the most fun cars are to drive. And I think a lot of people would say that rear-wheel drive has it every time because you can just play with them so much.
Full on the throttle again, and it works very easy.
Oh, yes.
And I think the brake is also working, eh?
Yes. Oh, that's great.
And it's also good, you can go very quick, very easy. You know, for an old man like me, it's very important to go very quick, very easy.
Wow. Regular viewers may be aware, it's a little bit above where I usually drive. But it's really... It's
But just a
and,
little
this guy has shares in a tyre company, so this is how he's able to make sure he's getting the best use out of them. It's really great to see how much fun has been kept in the design of the car. It's always, as the regulations increase year on year and things become ever more demanding, it's always a little concern that with new versions, some fun will be taken, you know?
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, the most important point in chassis and braking and tire development is all the guys in Porsche, they are all a little bit crazy, you know, they are all, everybody is a little bit crazy, but you know, in a positive way. And I think this crazy, you can work very well with this crazy guy, and then and I hope you feel that we have also fun to develop this car.
I have to say, every time we meet anybody who is responsible for development, they're usually just with a big grin on their face, telling us about everything they've been up to. But we heard some sad news earlier. That Mr. 911 himself. Yes. He's retiring.
Yes, because I'm just normally on testing, so I didn't see him so much. I saw him now last time, I think 1 year ago, and I saw him now here.
Now he's fully responsible for the design of the last 3, right?
Yes.
So that is a huge deal.
Yes, but he is going to be retired. It's also at one day in your life it comes. But also our new one, Frank Balliza, he is also the right one for the future.
Does that mean, I guess there's a bit of a changing of an era, really. Does that mean that we might be moving towards the end of the internal combustion engine? Do you feel that yet? Yes, no, every single time you say it to a racing driver, they're like, never. But fully electric 911, it's got to be coming at some point. You're not.
Not me.
Never,
I'm the wrong one for this. But for me personally, I like to hear noises in the car. But that's my personal opinion.
I think that's the biggest challenge facing the electric crossover, is how to deal with that. Because what we know from our viewers is the one thing that car fanatics dislike almost more than anything else is anything about a car that feels fake. Well, it would be easy in the modern era to pipe that noise, to synthesize it, but it's not the same. So how do you make that transition? I don't know. Guys, if you have any ideas, I would love to hear them. But, Timo and I have a date now for 60 years' time. 60 years' time. And my sense is that's got to be an electric car. So we will have an answer for you by then.
Stay
tuned.
Stay healthy.
Yeah, we can do it. Jonas, how are you going to feel about being in the back in 60 years?
No problem.
Yeah.
No problem, okay.
Excellent. Well, Timo, what can I say? Thank you so much for taking the time to show us. For me, this is everything I would expect of a 911 drive. The characteristic, and more than anything else, the ability to put a big, whopping great grin on your face. That, for me, is a 911, and that's what I have now. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Do you want to see the wet modus of the car?
The wet mode? Yeah.
Okay.
But this is kind of a bit of a cheat though, no? Because you don't need a wet mode.
but it's really it's a safety feature what we have. We have a system in the car who is recognized the wet condition.
Yeah.
And then he says you on a display on a dashboard, okay, it's a wet mode. It's wet. Please take care. And then at first, ABS, ESP is a little bit restricted, a little bit more close, and then you can go again on the wet mode, and then again you have more stability in the car. There are a lot of things they are changing a little bit.
We see now the difference in driving characteristic from without and then with.
At first I make a one lap with normal, and I make mistakes that you can see, okay, that's the car doing without, and after one lap with the wet mode, and
great.
Then to show you what's happened.
Great.
Okay. So now I make a little bit like a mistake. Okay,
great.
It works also. Jonas, alles gut bei dir?
Ja,
wunderbar. Woo! Okay, and now I go to the wet mode. I have to push the button to the left.
Okay.
I do the same things.
Huh.
But here I'm full on the throttle.
Wow. Wow.
Also here again, full on the throttle.
Wow.
Full on the throttle.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's much more safely.
Yeah. We're going to keep people a lot safer with these features.
Yes.
I think not only Porsche working with this technology, it's available, I think, coming through with a lot of the other manufacturers are always looking to see how they can keep developing the technology to keep people safer. But keep the fun. That's important.
Yeah.
Keep the fun. Woo! Wow.
Hey. But that's without, you know.
That's awesome. Oh boy. Oh man. I'm definitely not letting my wife watch this video. Wow.
Come. Okay, that's it.
Wow.
But that was without wet mode.
I tell you what, there is no amount of driver training you can have to do that. You need decades, many decades of experience. Now, I've got one more question for you. I really am keen to know the answer to. As a very basic driver, I find that when I take a car out on track, 90% of what I'm paying attention to is the noise of the car in terms of how I'm treating it. I'm obviously visually attached, but I'm listening to the car, I'm listening for all the information, and I'm not really paying very much attention to my displays down here. Obviously, the market, the modern world means we now have fully digital cockpits. How are you feeling about that? Do you just ignore it completely? What's your connection with it?
I'm you know, for these digital things, I'm a very bad guy because I have no, as a private guy, I have no smartphone. I have a Nokia for 30 euros, and that's okay for me. And for me, you know, the most important is revs and speed. But that's I'm a little bit old guy.
But if you had your choice, I mean, what I wonder is, being a guy with such experience anyway, like I assume when you sit in a regular car, there's no information on here that you really need. You feel that information anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you had the choice between this or standard analog dials only, I guess, oil temperature, revs, speed, what would you go with?
You know, I have a big passion for old timers, so I like also the old style in the dashboard. So
it's not just me. Come on, Porsche. We want a retro version too. The tech's great, but come on, let's big analog dials.
Yes. So but this is the way how it goes.
It does look very nice. I will say that for it. But you know what? In 60 years time, I will have that car fitted out with analog dials just for us.
60 years, we have a day in 60 years at the Hockenheimring. So it's in, when is it? In 2078, huh?
Yeah, and I guess by then it'll be the Hockenheim Airway, because most it'll be spaceships, I guess, that are
maybe
solar-powered spaceships that'll be racing, but we'll still be down here on the ground.
2078.
It's a deal. Thank you, Timo. Thank you very much.
Have a nice day. Wunderbar.
We've come inside so we can take a slightly closer look at the 911, and Porsche have been good enough to provide us with a complete cutaway model, so we really can get under the skin and see what's happening. And we have been joined by somebody rather special who's going to be able to explain to us what we're looking at. Could you please tell our viewers who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is August Achleitner, and I'm responsible, so-called vice president for the 911 and the 718. And so this is my next 911 because I do this job since 2001.
That's just showing off, really, isn't it? So what we're going to ask you to do is to take us through some of the many changes that have taken place on this 911 and help us understand what has changed and why it's changed. Can you do that with us?
Yeah, okay. I try to explain it to you a little bit, and let me start with a number. About 80% of all parts of this car are completely new. So there are only very few carryover parts from the 991, its predecessor. But let's start with the exterior. This is what you see at first when you have a look on the car. And you see this new body, which is much more muscular than the predecessor. Why is it? Because, for example, we enlarged the front axle at about 45 millimeters.
I'm just going to come around the other side of you so I don't get in the way of you showing the car. I really want the viewers to be able to see everything that you're pointing out. So you stay here and walk us around, and I'll make sure I get out of your way.
You see this muscular styling, and this personally, this reminds me to the race cars of the 70s of the 911, and we also took some styling details from these generations as in the front hood you can see. But with this big change, the wider track in the front, we have a much better drivability, especially in curves when there is the lateral movement of the car is better supported by the spring and dampers. Together with this, we have a wider track in the back, and so when we have a look at the car in the back, you see also here this wider track. That's also about 40 millimeters more, and we have exactly the same width as in the predecessor in the GTS or C4 models or GT3. So this car, from the dynamic point of view, is much better as a predecessor. You also can see, let me emphasize, this one is a new 21-inch rear wheel. That's the first time that we have a different diameter compared to the front wheels. Also, that means we can transmit more forces over the rear via the rear wheels, because in the 911 with the engine here and the weight here, we say it in German, here plays some music.
Am I right in thinking that with the all-wheel drive version, we have a slightly wider rear than the two-wheel drive?
Yeah, we had this in the past, starting with the 997, and we do not have it anymore. So we have the same width for C2 and C4 models, and the only difference you can see in the exterior is just a little bit different color of the grille in the back of the car, but the cars are from the exterior shape are the same.
So these larger wheels at the rear, irrespective as to whether you're going with the two-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive, they really do make a significant difference to the handling of the car.
Absolutely. The new car feels much more precise, and you can feel it on a test ride afterwards, and it's feelable immediately. So together with these geometric changes, we also have some changes in the steering system. So we have about 10% more direct steering feelable, and it feels like a little bit like a go-kart. And very good fitting to this is a new brake booster. This is electric powered, not anymore by under pressure, and gives you also a very hard and precise feeling on the brake.
I think you had me at go-kart. Now, I know that also new for this model, we have a new rain driving mode. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that works with the systems?
Yeah, we call it wet mode. Well, wet mode is nothing special, because you can see some competitors which also offer wet mode. But we have a completely new system right here installed, and you know, always the combination of a not so heavy sports car and wide tires, which you need to transmit the forces, is not so perfect when there's a lot of water on the road. So we want to help the driver to get a better drivability and controllability of the car. And so we installed the wet mode. The wet mode works in two steps. The first step is automatic. So the car has some sensors installed in the front wheelhouse, and it detects by itself if there's water on the road or even too much water on the road. And when it's detected that there's too much water, it changes the behavior of the ABS system and the traction system, and recommends to the driver, please go on the wet mode. And when the driver does this, then we change the aerodynamics and we change the accelerator pedal behavior. And when it's a C4 model, we transmit more forces to the front axle to improve the stability of the car.
So now, is the idea behind this to make the car safer, or to try and deliver as much of the original driving experience in the wet as we can have in the dry?
Let me say both. The car gets safer, And when you have the chance to test it, you feel the car is better controllable. Also at the limit, it's easier controllable, and it does not lose the traction so fast. So you can feel the limit much better.
Well, looking outside at the sky, it occurs to me that we may have the opportunity to try both of those modes here today. But we're very lucky because we all know how fantastic this car looks from the outside, but we have a stripped down version here that allows us to look in a little closer detail behind the scenes. Can we go around now and take a closer look? I'm looking at the big smile on your face. I'm guessing this is something you're really quite excited about.
Yeah, it's also for us not usual to see a cut at 911. And when you have the look here on the right-hand side of the car, you see there's not so much space left, and the car is completely filled with Technics. Here in the rear part of the car, you see a bigger change compared to the predecessor. That's the position of the intercoolers, because we have a turbo engine. And the intercooler now is placed here, especially here, and the airflow goes directly into the intercooler. So we have a more direct way from the air into the coolers, and have a better efficiency, and we get a cooler temperature into the combustion chambers and the cylinder of the engine. That makes the engine more efficient, more powerful, but also better in emissions.
Excellent. Well, it certainly is, from reading all of the material that comes out with the launch of the new car, the way that the air is utilized within the engine certainly helps us to understand a much greater refinement in terms of power and efficiency. And I honestly can't think how you could have used this space any more effectively than you can. Was this a real challenge to do in design terms with the chassis?
It's always an optimization. During the development of the predecessor, the 991, of the second generation, we already had some ideas how we can improve the system again. And well, that's engineering, and also the engineers, they have a creativity, and they know what to do next. But when we are in this area, we have a really completely new thing right in front of the engine. And in front of the engine of a 911, there's installed the gearbox. And now with we have a completely new PDK with 8 speeds instead of 7. And so the 7th and the 8 are overdrive. And as only the 7th gear had been before. And this ratio is much closer and feels much better. Both together, better efficiency in the engine with the new fuel injector systems and so on, together with the gearbox, makes the engine and the whole powertrain more efficient in comparison to the predecessor, and more powerful.
Well, if you're not quite familiar with the idea of overdrive and going from a 7-speed DSG to an 8, just think of the bit in Spinal Tap where they turn all the amps up to 11. That's now what we're going to be able to do with the engine in this car. Let's move slightly further forwards and take a look at what's happening down here.
Yeah, we have now we see here all these structural elements. We used a lot of aluminium parts and aluminium sheets, especially for the body and white, to save weight. Together with these necessary installations we now have for the next generation, we could keep the weight almost like it had been before, so we are quite satisfied with it. But when we are here, you can have a much closer look in the interior, and when you have a look especially on the instrument panel, you see the new instrument cluster with 2 7-inch screens on the left-hand side and right-hand side of the ref counter, and a big 11-inch center display in the middle. But we have as well some hard keys in the middle, 5 hard keys, where we can operate important function directly without going into menus of a screen.
Okay, so now we get to move up to the front and see where it all ties together up here. And we have the full LED matrix on this car, so we can actually see what they look like from underneath too.
Yeah, we have 3 different headlamps which are available for the new 911. Every headlamp is a LED headlamp, and you see here in this car the best option, that's a so-called matrix, with 84 LEDs per headlamp. With the matrix headlamp, you have the full beam position, the possibility to stay on full beam, also with traffic coming in front of you, and nobody has any problems with it, because we can switch off the necessary LEDs that your impression is in an optimum way, and the other people in the traffic have no problems with your, especially with your very bright headlight. And this works perfectly, and we are very proud of it. So LED in every version. And what we can see here also in front of the 911, you see the trunk case in the front with about 135 liters of content, and the fuel tank behind it. And the fuel tank is available in two different sizes. The one is the standard one is 67 liters, and you can have a 90 liter option as well.
Yeah, but that's extra weight. We don't want extra weight. We don't want extra weight for the car. So I have to say, it always feels a little bit unfair when we walk around the car, because the thousands of hours that are in this, and obviously you can't fill that just into 3 minutes of telling me everything that's gone into this design. But every car has its own unique personality. When you think about this new 911, what is, if you sum up what you would want customers to think about when you think of this car, what would you say? What is the 911 embodied for you?
Well, the 911 for me is the best sports car, because why is it for me the best sports car? It's a car you can go in the racetrack. We are here on the Hockenheimring, and you can push the car to the limit as long as you want, and then you go back quite smoothly on the autobahn, and maybe you go to the theater tomorrow with your wife. It's no problem. So this car is able to do both things. And last weekend by myself, I bought a Christmas tree and brought it home with my new 911.
Okay, I'm struggling to believe that. I've got to be honest. Where did it go?
With a carrier system on the roof. So with a 911, you can do everything, and the new 911, of course, can these things even better than its predecessor.
Well, I think it's really a fantastic achievement, and thank you so much for taking the time to show us around. It's really been a pleasure.
For me, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's one thing that makes me feel sad about the idea of owning a Porsche, it is, of course, that you really want to be able to show your friends the engine, and clearly you don't usually have the opportunity to look at it in quite as much detail. Now, in a little bit, we're going to go and look at a full working model of that upstairs here, so we can show you what the new engine actually looks like without everything else around it. But for now, it's really great to be able to see the engine in this much detail as it sits within the car. Now, an awful lot has changed here, but I think it's worth in particular drawing your attention to what we can't see, and that's below here. And those are the 2 brand new particle filters on this car that help it run that much cleaner. Now, that also obviously connects to something that I'm going to show you down at the bottom, which is rather nicely what we can see underneath this exhaust port when we strip that back away. And what you're looking at here is an exhaust manifold that's been moved closer to the center of the car. And the reason that has taken place is in order to protect those particle filters and that system in the event of any impact happening on the rear side. So a really nice piece of design. What you can't see here is that we also have a variable flap that's built into this manifold on both sides, and that really gives us the best of that engine sound, which you really, really are going to want with this car. But we can also see the way that that exhaust manifold has been incorporated into the finished effect here. So, what do you think, guys? I think that's integral enough to call it the real thing. What do you think? Now, I'm not sure Porsche will be all that happy about me pointing this out, but it's always the little details that make the difference. And obviously, even in small cars now, we have ISOFIX points so we can fit children in. Something that has really nicely changed in this model. If you have a look at the back of the seats, here we have a nice hook for shopping bags. On the previous model, this was much more prominent. And clearly, if you're a passenger sitting behind, albeit a small one, and the braking's a little bit brisk, well, it's a much nicer surface to come in contact now than it used to be. Here we can see a cutaway of the engine, which really allows us to see what the new layout's going to be looking like. It's producing 308 kilometers per hour flat out and 450 horsepower. So I think you're going to agree that's more than enough that you're going to want to drive around in. Now, it achieves that by using a new bi-turbo design, flat six, and that's an entirely new intake system. And you can see by looking at either side exactly how that layout works. It's obviously much easier to take a look at it in this format than it is when it's covered up in the car. They're very, very happy with this here at Porsche, and I think you can get a good sense of why. It's really quite an amazing technological achievement to fit all of this engine into the available space and to make the most out of the power available. Well, a lot of that also has to do with the way in which the new cooling system for the engine works. The weather here at the Hockenheimring is starting to close in on us. And I'm actually quite pleased because the dynamic quality of the light's really starting to show off this paintwork and the lights of the new 911 in really quite an expressive way. So what does it all add up to? This is the third version of the 911 that the product director is going to be in charge of, and it will be his last. So I'm very pleased that we had the chance to walk around and take a good look at it with him. Is it a fair representation of what is by now a legend? Well, a lot has changed over the past 60 years, but I'm more than happy to say that the most important component of the 911's design is still exactly as it should be, and that's fun. Not only does this car look fantastic, now okay, that's only my opinion, and I'm sure some of you might feel a little differently, but I'm more than happy with the way that the aesthetic of the car has been evolved to look modern and stylish. There are some really nice design elements here, but at no stage of that process has anyone forgotten what this car is all about. So the increase of the larger wheels at the back really adding to that dynamic traction that the car has, the improved handling, the improved power and performance, and okay, I'm a traditionalist, but even I have to admit it, the new assistance systems do add something extra. And I also quite like the fact that you still have to say to the car, maybe I would like your help after all. It all adds up to a fantastic overall package. Now, although we don't have final numbers for you yet, I'm certain that all of that's going to come at a cost. But the most important thing of all is that for people out there of all ages, whether they're young or whether they're old, I'm happy to still be able to tell you that this car is more than a bit deserving of a little bit of the wall space in your bedroom. We can all still dream. Guys, thank you so much for watching this. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed making it. If you have any comments or questions, pop them below. Please subscribe, and we hope we'll see you all again soon.